Hello there, and welcome to a complete tutorial for Creators Kit 2.0. Creators Kit is a plugin for spawning, animating, and programming fake objects into your scene. It's a great tool for content creators of all types, whether you're trying to create your perfect scene, take a screenshot for a thumbnail, export models to 3D editing software, and much more. And with this 2.0 update, you can now keyframe everything to help create fantastic, believable scenes in RuneScape. This tutorial is split into many different parts. If you're already familiar with Creators Kit, I'd suggest skipping to the programming tutorial to find out how to work the new stuff. If you're just starting, then you're already in the right place. If, after the tutorial, you're still looking for help, links to my Discord and other support links can be found below. Before we begin, I will note that Creators Kit development is an active work in progress. These tutorials will become outdated over time until I remake them. So, when in doubt, I suggest heading down to the support links, including my Discord channel, where I'm usually pretty available to help out. In any case, let's get started with the absolute basics, creating and spawning objects. So first, let's just navigate through a couple of the different locations where you're going to find all your controls for Creators Kit. So, first you want to make sure you download it, of course, through the plugin hub. Just go over here, search up Creators Kit, and it should be this option right here. Next, what you want to do is you want to open up the config menu. This is going to be very important to have on the side, as well as the side panel. So side panel, config menu. A couple other things which are going to be handy for us is I like to have a couple plugins like hide widgets around, so I can press Ctrl H and hide all my widgets. I also like to have Fashionscape handy because it allows me to set the look of my character. As you can see, I've given him a Khazard helmet and plate body, and I'll give him a dragon halberd as well. Actually, how about some iron claws? Those look fantastic. Okay, so next let's walk through some basic camera controls. Let's go to our config menu for Creators Kit. And let's scroll down. Oculus Orb. These are all our camera controls. We are going to toggle the Oculus Orb mode by hitting page up. And that will let us use WASD and R and F to move around. We can also hold shift to go slower. And we can change the speed of the orb. Default is 36. This is what 36 looks like. We can change the speed here. We can also add hotkeys. I like to have them set to control 1, 2, and 3 to set speeds 5, 9, and 36. So if I hit control 2, there we go, we're now at speed 9. Control 1, we're now at speed 5. And back to speed 36, which is our default. Next, let's quickly go through auto rotate. You can set auto rotate left, right, up, and down. I'm going to set left to alt left and right to alt right. So when I hit those buttons, it just rotates in linearly. You can also set it whether it's going to, or the speed that it rotates at, like so. And hit this button again to disable it. So those are going to be our camera controls. To start using Creators Kit, I always recommend enabling control hotkeys. This is going to be very important for a lot of things you do in Creators Kit. You just have to be aware that it will prevent you from using control click to run or walk, to toggle the run or walk mode for your regular character. So make sure you turn it off when you are finished using Creators Kit, or just turn the plugin off. That works as well. Okay, let's get using our first objects. Go into the side panel here. I'm going to add an object, and I'm going to click somewhere in the scene, right or left click, to regain focus on the scene. As you can see, my focus is now in this text box, and now my focus is back in the scene. Whenever you do things here, you want to make sure your focus returns back to the scene. So you'll notice I tend to right click the scene quite a bit. Okay, and I'm going to hold control. And now you can see that I have a preview of a crate that I'm moving around. And I'm going to left click to place that object 0. So what is an object in Creators Kit? An object, think of it like a piece of clay that you can mold into different 3D models, or you can animate it with an animation ID, and later we'll be able to program it so that it moves around. But think of it, again, an object is like a piece of clay. You can turn it into all these different types of models, give it all these sorts of animations, programs, so on and so forth. Let's start by doing some other basic controls. So to delete an object, you can just press the X up here. If you have multiple objects, you can see that one is selected at any given time. So when I go back to the scene and I hold Control, it is that object, as you can read, object 3, that is currently being selected, and therefore the one I can manipulate at this time. I can hold Control Scroll to scroll through the different objects that I have in the side panel here. And I'll show you a little bit more detail about Control Scroll later. I can hit the duplicate button. So let's say I have this fence here. I can hit duplicate to duplicate that object. Control left click to move it to wherever I want. And I can also delete that. Control left click to place that there. I can also rotate the object. As you can see, it is slowly rotating. It is 248 jagex units of rotation is 360 degrees. I can also do something a little bit simpler, and if I hold Control, left click and drag, you can see there's an arrow that points to where I want the object to point to. Pretty easy. Okay, so those, oh yes, and if you want to duplicate by hotkey, you can just hit Control D and it will duplicate where you are pointing. Okay, so those are the absolute basic controls. Now let's talk about getting different models. As I said before, again, Control left click to place that there. An object can have any model in the game. Now, there's two different modes for how to choose a model. You can enter in a model ID, which we'll get into a little bit, and this determines every model in the cache is signified by an ID, but there are many objects in the game, NPCs in the game, and players in the game who are composed of multiple models. So, by using this model ID control here, you're only entering a single model, so it might only be a helmet, or might only be a torso, or only these iron claws. Right now, we have the model ID at 7699, which is a crate. And if I increase this, I'll just use my arrow keys, you can see I'm changing to different model IDs. There we go. This is a good example. This helmet is only a single model ID, and therefore my player is composed of probably 10 or 11 different model IDs. So how do you find different model IDs? Well, we can get into that right now. This is the Minimal OSRS item database, a very useful tool for finding different model IDs. I'm going to go into objects here, and I'm going to search up crate. This will be linked below. As you can see, it gives me an object ID. It also gives me a model ID, and sometimes multiple model IDs, as in the case of this crate right here. So if I take the model ID for this crate, 3815, and enter it in, I'm given a crate model ID. A crate model, I should say. Other things that, that's the very basics of model ID. Now, much of the time, you are going to be, instead of grabbing individual models, you're going to be grabbing collections of models. And to do this, Creator's Kit has a very handy series of features called storing. So when I store something by right-clicking it or its tile in the environment, as you can see, Creator's Kit has different store options. When I store something, I save its model as a custom model. And to do that, I'm going to right-click my own player tile. I'm going to hit Store Only. It says Model Stored Local Player. and I'm going to change the mode from ID to custom. So custom models are typically a bunch of models put together. As I said, my character is composed of maybe 10 or 11 different model IDs, and this custom model that I stored mashed all those models together. So, as you can see here, now I have a drop down that has my local player over here. And if I go and store Brian, I can also find his model and change my object to reflect that model. Let's do that same for the shop assistant, store only, and switch to the shop assistant. There he is. I can do that for the well as well. Beautiful. Okay, so that's the very basics of storing. You can store, obviously, as I've shown you, NPCs, players, objects around the game. All these things can be stored. Next, what I'd like to do is I would like to show you a website called RuneMonk, which can be very, very handy for finding different models and animations as well. Right here. We'll just let it load. Fantastic. So you can search up different NPCs. Let's find the wise old man. And if we look at his data, you can see that he's composed of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different models. And if I were to choose one, nope, don't want that. If I were to choose, oh my goodness, 187. I'm not going to try and copy it. Clearly that's a big problem. Switch back to model ID, put in 187. There you go. Now we get his party hat. RuneMonk is also very useful for getting animations as well. As you can see, there's a bunch of animation IDs, which we will get into shortly. Let's just switch back to custom model mode. Let's go back to our shop assistant over here. Next method of getting different models is I'm going to show you the toolbox, which you can find by hitting toolbox. Let's skip all these tabs because they're not important to us yet and go to the cache searcher. So by using the cache searcher, I can type in something and find all the different versions of the wise old man. And I'm going to store only, and it should pop up right here. There he is. Beautiful. You can also search up objects. So for example, if I want a Falador portal, can store that. I wonder what that's even used for. You can search up different items. So Armadillo Godsword. You can get its ground model or its worn model. Beautiful. And the rest we won't touch on just yet. So that's basic storing. Now, for your convenience, there is a method to add an object and store at the same time. So far I've been using the store only option, but I can add Henja over here, and it will create a new object and automatically add that model as my selected custom model. So I can just hit Control click, and there we go. There he or she is. I think that's supposed to be a boy. Yes, because that's his sister. So store add is a very convenient feature for grabbing a model and creating an object and adding an animation all in one go. Speaking of, animations are set. One second, let me set this back to delete these. And I'm going to quickly change, oh, no, don't go. I'm going to change this guy's name to Shop Assistant, because one thing with dealing with large projects is it's very important to keep organized. It's very easy to get a little out of hand. Okay, so Mr. Shop Assistant here. As you can see, he's currently adopting a very boring static pose. He's not even looking, he doesn't even have a fun idle like me right now. So I want to add some animations for him. So first things first, let's get into our overlay toggle, which is page down. And I'm going to add player overlays because this is going to help us get animations. As you can see, my current animation, my active animation is -1, whereas my pose animation is 808. Think of the pose animation as your character either standing, walking, or running. They're sort of like the really basic animation set that your character needs access to. Whereas active animations are, think of it as taking an action, playing an emote, for example, or casting a spell, or making an attack. If I dance, you can see my active animation changes to 866. So first I'm just going to give this Shop Assistant a basic pose animation of 808. There we go. And let's give him the dance animation of 866. Now this animation is just going to loop unto eternity. If I want to, I can also set the frame. For example, if I'm trying to create a thumbnail, or if I'm trying to export a certain pose to Blender, I can change the frame just like so to pick the exact frame that I want this character to settle at. Okay. Other ways to find animations is our animation searcher. So if I wanted to find the dance emote, I would have to type emote dance 866, and if I just angle myself correctly to see everyone at the same time, I'm going to change this back to 808 just to demonstrate that I can double click here and it will set this animation to the currently selected object. So double click that, there we go. Now his animation is 866. Emote dance Scottish, I wonder what that looks like. Sure, okay. Yes, so Cache Searcher, very, very useful for finding different models and different animations. And you'll notice that if I was using the Store Add feature on all these guys to quickly add an object and set its model to the thing that I right-clicked, there's also a similar feature to store and add over in the Cache Searcher. So if I want King Rolled, I can click him, store and add, and he's right here. Control left click to place him down. Okay, so that is the very basics of storing models and placing them and changing the orientation. You can also toggle their spawn status, so whether you actually get to see them or not. Anything else that I should cover in this? Yes, there are other hotkeys for relocating and rotating objects. Nowadays, I mostly recommend sticking to the control hotkeys. So control left click or control click and drag. I find that to be the most useful. So let's set up a really basic scene and just to kind of go over what we've gone through so far. I am going to delete these guys and let's just start fresh, and I'm going to narrate everything as I go. So first I'm going to use the Fashionscape plugin, and I'm going to make my character look really interesting. Now the Fashionscape plugin can be bugged every now and then, and that's what we're seeing right now. So instead I'm just going to use what I have here. I'm going to store add my local player. I'm going to use my camera, bring myself over here, store add XP for Jesus. Wonderful name. I hope this guy never finds this video. Actually, no, I hope he does. And I'm going to store add this shop assistant, store add this shopkeeper. We're going to have a little Mexican standoff. So what do we need for that? We're going to need some cactus. Let's find in our cache searcher cactus. And let's just add a couple different variants. So I have no idea what these are going to turn out like. That's why I still use the minimal OSRS database a fair amount, because it will give me visual previews of the objects that I'm looking at. But you know, you can use it. You don't have to. It's there if you want. I'm just going to store out a bunch of these, and we're just going to use the control click feature and control scroll to move these around. Now, this is a fantastic little demonstration. If you look at this wonderful cactus right here, you notice that at certain camera angles, it starts to glitch out. The model is much larger than a single tile. And that's where you're going to run into some trouble where you get clipping with nearby tiles. This can be fixed by changing the radius. So if I increase the radius, it will slowly, there we go. It is now an appropriate size to show above the tiles around it. You notice that this will start to cause problems, so don't change everything to a radius of 300, or you can see there's a bunch of really awkward wall and item clipping that we really don't want to see. But if you're putting it out in an open space, that's no problem at all. So anyway, control drag, gonna hit control D to duplicate this a couple of times. Beautiful. What else we have? We have this guy, ooh, this one. Control D to duplicate that. This cactus could certainly, let's select that cactus. It's this one right here. Could certainly do with a bit of a radius increase. There we go. Now what else does a Mexican standoff need? It needs a gun of some type, but I don't know if RuneScape has a lot of those. So let's just add a couple cannons. Alright, if I scroll down here, now obviously this is getting a little bit unwieldy, having all these objects and one scroll bar. So we'll get into how to deal with many objects a little bit later. And oh, look at that. We can see that the radius is not set quite right. So we'll just increase that slowly until it is. Oh, not quite. 65. That seems to do the trick pretty well. Okay, so there is our first scene. In the next tutorial, we're going to go through how to manage all these different objects. But the final component before we get there, let's just finish talking about the overlay. So as I mentioned before, page down is your overlay toggle. As you can see, I currently have all of my objects overlaid. That's these little labels right here. I also have object path overlay enabled, which we'll talk about in a future tutorial. I currently have player overlay enabled. As I discussed before, that puts the animation IDs above my head and the heads of other players. I can also enable an overlay for NPCs, so it'll show their animations as well as their NPC ID. It's very important that that is distinct from model ID. This is an NPC ID, as well as their active and pose animations. I have the object ID for these ground objects, object IDs for walls, object IDs for decorative objects like torches, and object IDs for projectiles. This is most relevant when you are using something like the minimal OSRS object database. If you know the object ID, you can then find its models. So for example, if I have, let's do something a little more distinct. Yeah, how about this? The wall so the object ID for the wall is 1542. So if I go 1542, I can find the model IDs that compose that door right here. So 14928, 14928. There we go. That is the this is the model ID for the door that had an object ID of 1542. Yes, this is also useful for, can be useful for NPCs. I suppose less nowadays now that we have the cache searcher. But if I have, let's change that around. If I know the NPC ID of 1614, I could also use this to go 1614, and that should bring us to files, who has model IDs of all of these. So yeah, that was just a last little thing I wanted to add before we wrap up this tutorial.